It's very, very dangerous.
Get these spidey sense, I was like, oh, something's off.
And I'm just like, man, I'm waiting to hear something,
Keep that crowd warmed up. There's Mr. Jehovah Tiger.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the 19th episode? Yeah, 19th episode of the War Cry podcast. I'm your host, Jehovah Tiger. Just chilling, just hanging out. The newest episode of Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation, your boy was back. I unblocked all y'all. You're safe now. Y'all can go on Facebook and mark safe from Yehola Tiger's blockings. Y'all back. Man, I unfortunately I thought about coming down from the rafters, but, Russell's house just doesn't have the frame. It's just not built like that. I was trying to come down possibly like Shawn Michaels coming down from the side and making his way all the way down. But, nah, it just ain't worked out that way. But, we talked about Giants on this episode. If you guys can hear in the background, our cat Oscar, Lord Oscar, first of his name, last of his name, he is wanting in this room so bad. Anyways, so if you hear a random cat in the background, guys, I apologize. This man is unrelenting. So, like I said, we talked about Giants on the latest episode. Man, one thing about the show in general, but just the topics that we talk about, there's so much things that I have done research on over the course of basically my entire conscious life that, when we start talking about things, I'm like, dang, I actually know something about that. Or dang, I actually kind of know what's going on with that. And one thing about Giants, man, it's and I didn't mention this on the episode. I don't believe I listened to it back yesterday, but the Smithsonian, they're finding bones all over the place. And allegedly, it's kind of wild, but allegedly they've been throwing giant bones in different rivers all over the country. So if they find one in New Mexico, they dump it in the nearest river, and they get rid of different artifacts by dumping them. Obviously mobsters back in Chicago would be dumping everything and bodies and all that stuff. That's the easiest way to get rid of things because it's impossible to find. But that's one thing I just found kind of crazy about that whole thing. And with the Paiute tribe, and basically there's there's some descendants of that tribe, but don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're extinct, but that's not as the history is told by people in the past, and it's kind of crazy. But if you haven't heard that episode, Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation, Giants, Russell puts the video up on YouTube. It's Spotify, Apple, you name it, it's there. But go check that out. And I know Russell just released his Okie podcast. I know he had a group on there. I think it was Wednesday. And I cannot remember the name. I know it has Cherry in it. Russell, I'm sorry if you hear this. I'm sorry, man. I can't remember the name of that group, but his episode released on Wednesday, and I know Pump Action Podcast just released Hercules. So I haven't listened to it yet, but I'll have to check that out. Go check Tyler Randall's podcast out, and then if you want to go check out Chris's podcast or his comings and goings, and he's always posting on TikTok and Facebook. Go check him out, Christopher Honka Hill, on TikTok or Facebook, and we're off and running. So yeah, I'm glad to be back. That was one thing that I am very big on being punctual, and I know people say, oh, we run on Indian time. I have beat that out of me. I have literally, I don't know if by evolution or adaptation, I am not that person. If you tell me to be somewhere at 1 o'clock, I'm going to be there at 12:50. I just was always that way. And one thing that it bothers me, not really, I guess bothers me, but kind of makes me feel kind of bad is, not being able to record with those guys. Because I know, like I said, I know that everyone brings their own little thing. So that's something that, I do love doing. And I hopefully, we'll see here in the next week. We're supposed to be recording at the end of the month of April. So like I said, fingers crossed. But I appreciate you guys listening to both podcasts and all podcasts from all of us in that group, because that's one thing that I mentioned this before in a previous episode. I just think sometimes, especially Indians, we get bougie a little bit. Like we only listen to our friends' podcasts, or we only mess with this person because they're friends with that person, or we kind of get some nepotism a little bit. And so, another podcast that I've been listening to, and it's a pretty short form podcast, but it's Res Scares by Dom. He's got some good stuff going on. He always tells different stories, and he's from the First Nations, kind of up north. So I've been listening to his podcast, and it's pretty good. He told a story about, I thought it was kind of interesting, because when you lose somebody and you're obviously sad, you're very sad, but at the same time, something happens. So he had somebody basically touch someone's shoulder, or an entity of the sorts touch the shoulder of somebody. I guess they might have been talking about some kind of sad things, and he said he called it Happy Scares. I think it was Happy Scares 1, as was the name of that episode. But man, I was really like, man, that's sometimes that happens, where you're not doing too good, and you're missing somebody who's passed, and something happens where, like, it feels like, or songs played on the radio that remind you of them, or you have a chance encounter with somebody who kind of reminds you of your loved one. So, I'd go listen to his podcast too. It's called Res Scares. I think it's definitely on Spotify, and he's also on TikTok as well under Res Scares. But on this episode, I'm kind of not really having a topic. I'm just going to talk, and we'll see where it goes. I don't expect this to be a very long podcast. But some things have kind of been on my mind, things I've seen, over the course of the week, and I feel like I got to give y'all like a news report, like, hey, this is what happened with this person. No, so the Cherokee elections are coming. They're making their way here. I've been around people, or family members of people, and one thing I don't really like about politics in general, but politicians, is they don't tell you exactly what you want to hear. They tell you what they want you to hear. And that's one thing that I get so irritated with. Like, there's been things done, and I'm not just pointing at the Cherokee Nation, but like, there's been things done, in each tribe. Like, there's something added, to each admin, like, who comes in. But, like, I just seen, a couple things on Facebook that's kind of made me, kind of looking side-eye. What's that bombastic side-eye? That's me right now, like, that bombastic side-eye. And it's just things that are like, like I always see the blood quantum thing come up, or, or people saying, or someone saying that's a high up in the tribe who's not Cherokee, saying that they're now Cherokee because of a ceremony. I just kind of think, I kind of bombastic side eye. It's just kind of like, why are we putting this person, giving this person a platform on native platforms? And we have to take it in. It makes me feel some type of way about that. Is, not saying, like I said, not saying anything terrible, but just we give platform, like we do that. Like, that's what Indians do, is we give platforms, and we allow people who aren't us And maybe that's not really the case. Maybe it's just taken from us, that platforms, where they're just, they go off, off rip, and we just have to accept it. I don't know. It could go either way, but I just saw that, and I'm referring to someone who is now, I guess you'd say, a very high position, and his non-native wife. And, seeing the platform given to that person, and from what I've seen on Facebook, which I know you can't believe everything on Facebook. It just, I don't know, it just makes me feel, like kind of gives me the ick, and, to claim to be Cherokee or complain or, claim to be Indian when you're not, to me is, ceremonies aside, I know that there's been, non-natives adopted by Cherokee, Cree, all these Choctaw, all these people, or all these different tribes, and, they're in the tribe. But to claim that you got it in you, just bombastic side-eye. And I've been watching, different shows over the week, over the course of the week, and I watched a show. It's called Severance. It's on Apple TV Plus. And one thing that really struck the core, like really hit me hard, and it shook me almost. Like this show shook me. Like shows usually don't do this, to me and make me feel something more than what the show actually is. But the show is about a guy named Mark S. And he gets a severance, so his work-life balance to like the highest degree. So essentially, when he goes up the elevator to his job, his work self comes out. And so when he goes back down the stairs to go home at night at 5 o'clock, his personal self, his normal self comes back out, and he goes home and, lives his life. So there's two separate sides of him, and neither one of them know what's going on in either side. And I always kind of laugh, like when I hear employers and different employers that I've had, always talk about work-life balance, but they want you to get, they want you to go above and beyond sometimes. To me, that I find that kind of funny, like in a sense of the show, because Mark S, he definitely doesn't know what's going on in his personal life, but he definitely doesn't, but he knows what's going on in his work life, and his work life kind of sucks. And, there's a character in that show who doesn't want to work there anymore. Like they are done, and they do all these attempts to try to get out of this job. And I'm not going to spoil the whole show, but, I always go back to like, I mentioned this on Okie Podcast with Russell, back when I was on with him, and one thing that drives me absolutely crazy is like, who was it Henry Ford invented the 40-hour work week? Like my job, like jobs I've had, I've gotten them done in like 25 hours. Like, I think it's just kind of crazy to like maybe this is just me being a millennial. Like, there's some old heads, you guys are going to be listening to this and being like, what is this dude talking about? Like, I was working 60-hour weeks at here, like, but like that shouldn't be our life. And that's one thing about this show that kind of shook me, more than it should have been, or like than it should have, was like the fact that like what happens at work technically really doesn't matter to your personal life. And I think that's one thing that like over the course of, of time, and I see this now, I'll be honest with you, people are so scared, to, like, their job is everything to them in some aspects. And I think for me, over the course of, the last 3 or 4 years, I will leave a job. Like, I really will. I'll be out. I'm sorry. Like, if you're not doing this for me, you promised me this. You told me this was going to happen. It hasn't happened. There's no pay raise. There's none of this. I'll go find someone else who appreciates me. And I think that's one thing about this show is regardless of how terrible this is, the personal self doesn't really care about the work self, as if the work self is beneath the personal self in this show. And I don't know, just kind of crazy. If you have to go watch it, you have to go watch it to understand, what I mean. And they call them, it's kind of a wild term, but they call them innies and outies. And I'm like, ugh, sound kind of icky. But, I have just a hard time when I see people, coworkers, or, people that I've worked with in the past, and they're just scared. Like they just, maybe they believe they don't have skills, or they believe that they don't have the right, physical tools. I don't know, but I've just never, I've come to realize in this life where, an employer can get rid of you for anything, any reason. They don't care. Sorry, I know you got 4 kids and, you're basically, lifting the world up, making sure your kids are fed, but you're not really a good fit for us. And I think, one thing that for me, and just how I am, I've tried to take some of that power back. Where, okay, you as an employer are not doing what you need to do. I will find someone who will do the things to keep me. I always kind of joke around with people, but I'm like a 1-year deal. Like that's what I am. I'm a 1-year deal. I sign 1-year deals. Now in the long term, that's not a good idea, obviously, but I just I want to be respected. I want to be wanted. I want people and employers who want me to be there, and not putting me there just because I'm a body. And I think that's one thing what I'm trying to get across in this whole spiel is that you're more valuable than you think, and value is not placed upon by someone else. Value is what you do, on a day-to-day basis that makes you valuable. And everyone's valuable at the end of the day. Everyone has some sort of value, and everyone's needed in some sort of capacity. And so that's why I say that, with this show, is it kind of made me realize that there's value to your work self. There's value to who you are. You don't have to be a robot and control your feelings and not say not be, telling, your opinion, even if it's an honest opinion and you genuinely care, and you want to make your workplace better. Sometimes, and you're afraid because you may be afraid of the backlash. What I'm saying is let it go. Let's just let it rip. If it sucks, it sucks. Let them know. But like I said, guys, I'm just kind of, talking, some things I've seen over the week. I got kind of spicy with the native stuff, but I'm sure you guys will forgive me if it offends you. But that's never really my thing too. Is I'm not really here to offend anybody, but it's just observations that I make. And sometimes my observations are right, sometimes they're wrong. No one bats 100, unless you're Michael Jordan. Then you do. But one thing too, like another thing that I find very interesting with just, and I would say different communities like online. So there was a discussion, and this may be for my cryptid people, my people that like Bigfoot, Dogman, cryptids, I think is, yeah. I keep saying cryptic. Cryptids. There was a discussion that came up on a couple podcasts or a couple live streams that I watch on YouTube, and to me this has really kind of been interesting to me. So the theory is, this is going to sound wild. The theory is that Bigfoot are the masters of dogmen. So if you don't know what dogmen are, they're basically upright walking wolves. They're They're very man-like, but they have a lot of dog features. But they're just basically walking wolves that are very big. And I had listened to a podcast called The Confessionals with Tony Merkel, and he had a guy named Martin Groves on. And Martin had this crazy encounter with like these dog men. Well, then as he was at the end of the encounter, he looks up kind of on the hill and he sees this Bigfoot, and these Bigfoot there was more than one, was directing these dog men to do what he needed them to do. And so that kind of put me in like a kind of a weird tailspin of like a rabbit hole that I was not expecting to go down. And so then I was listening to another podcast, and someone who I believe to be not crazy, but someone who basically says that there's something going on between Bigfoot and Dogman, and that's the reason why we don't hear about fights between them. And they believe that dogmen, they're essentially dogs for the Bigfoot, Sasquatch. And the guy was talking about different encounters where the Bigfoot was around, but the encounter started off as a Bigfoot encounter. Then it ended in a dogman encounter. And one thing that they brought up is like basic instincts of dogs. Like dogs want to be loved by us, by humans. They're man's best friend. They want that admiration, and whether they want it or not. Now you have some rogue dogs who be wilding out, but one thing I thought was just so interesting about this is that like these encounters, they always end up with the dogman basically escorting people out of the area. And that maybe that this is, maybe the Sasquatch is like a different, level of being. And these dogman werewolf things are basically their pets, which is kind of a wild thought if you think about it. But that was something I kind of went on a rabbit hole about, and one of the the story that that they were talking about. Eventually somebody ended up going missing, and they couldn't find them, and they never found the body or anything. And then that goes into like cover-ups of like what these animals or what these beings or whatever you want to call it, creatures, monsters, what they're doing is people are just going missing, especially up in the Appalachian Trail area. You got some missing down in New Mexico, by the border of Mexico. You have different things, people going missing in different areas, and so it's just interesting, and it kind of, it could tie into missing 411, and it's just a lot of like, who knows what, really. I don't know, it's very, very interesting to me, very interesting. But we're hitting about the 25-minute mark. I'll probably edit this down. It'll probably end up being like 22 minutes, 20 minutes. Short episode this week. Like I said, I guess all my episodes are short. I always say the short episode this week, it's like 20 minutes. Like all my episodes are 20 minutes. But I appreciate you guys listening, and I appreciate, everyone that tunes in. And I want to give a special shout out. So I got some family up in Nebraska area that listens to the podcast, and they're on the Scott side of our family, and I'd like to give a good shout out and to Sandy Scott. Just recently, that side of my family, they lost a brother, cousin, dad, Johnny Scott, and so I always think about them. I'm kind of the one that I'm not one to be reached out to. I don't do the reaching out, and my dad, kind of was telling me, and so I'd like to shout out, the Scott side of the Tiger Scott family, and Sandy Scott. I appreciate you listening. I truly do. I think supporting family members and things that they do, I think is extremely important. Even if it's from afar. So I do appreciate it, and like I said, I think about Johnny a little bit every now and then, because you think of people who are pillars for a community or a group of people who did things for people and above and beyond. So I feel the pain of what you guys are going through and losing him, and so I appreciate you guys. And you can also catch me on Facebook, Yahola Tiger, TikTok, One Man Band 918. I'm on Twitter, One Man Band 918. I'm kind of curious, if you guys, if you're a Spotify listener, I'll have questions at the end. I want to know your guys' opinion on things. I know that some people voted for a Dogman episode. We will have a flat Dogman episode and where these upright walking wolves come from. That'll probably come in on a different, obviously down the road, obviously. But like I said, if you guys catch me at those socials, I appreciate everyone that listens. We're at 2.5K audio listens. We're at close to over I think it's like 2,000 YouTube views. So I appreciate everybody, and I'll catch you on the next one.